guys who've just joined us. So Michael, Dorothy and John, maybe you could give us a little bit of background. Maybe we'll start with Michael.
Hi, my name is Michael Fitzgerald. I'm from Interplay app. So Interplay basically is a tool that helps designers design with real code in their browser, so they can actually do realistic testing with real data and responsive testing as well.
Hello, I'm Dorothy Ryan. I work for a company called Azavi. We make connectivity simple. We basically have a platform, a software platform for connecting mobile devices and Internet of Things.
Hi, I'm John Moriarty. I'm part of Fjord's Dublin team, relatively new Dublin team, so we're part of Accenture's new innovation centre based in the Docklands. I'm an interaction design lead, so yeah, that's me.
Great. So, I mean, I suppose what we'll talk about first is maybe the current situation for UX design. And Jonathan, I'm going to ask you a question.
Hello.
You originally said that when you went into clients, you often had to explain what UX design is and why it's valuable. Where are we now?
Is this working? Yeah. So I think it's there's not a lot of having to explain. I mean, like I would say, you know, it's the majority of clients we go into now, the majority of companies, they don't need sort of convincing that design is something that they need or innovation is something that they need. It's just it's starting to get messy again with a lot of different types of processes and terms. So it's all about just trying to figure out what is the problem that they really want to solve, because from their perspective, they usually come to us and say, hey, we need like design sprints, or we need like UX, or we need innovation. Like we need 7 innovations right now. And so we're trying to figure out, you know, we're trying to just like figure out from that kind of blob of things that they're talking to us about, like what is it that we could actually help with, and how, like what are the different services that they actually need. So do they actually need UX design? Do they actually need these different things? So now it's not about convincing them to get in the door in the first place. It's just about trying to sort of focus them into the specific things that they actually might need.
Okay, so figuring out what the buzzwords really mean.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And maybe, John, I might ask you, talking about innovation. I mean, Fjord has developed the Centre of Innovation here in Hanover Quay. And what sort of projects are you looking at today that you think will become a reality in the near future?
Sure. So I suppose we're looking at the premise of the Innovation Centre in general is to explore emerging technologies and what they mean for our clients. So it's the dock is where I work. That's Accenture's Global Innovation Centre. So we're working with Accenture and Accenture's clients from all over the world. And the kind of major domains we're looking at are blockchain, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and within that there's a lot of different areas. And I suppose in terms of kind of what's on the immediate horizon, there's a lot of things, like for example, we recently partnered with Microsoft to create an identity system for refugees based on blockchain, using a combination of blockchain and biometric data. And so that's something that's recently been presented and at the UN, and that's going to be hopefully launched quite soon. So that's going into development soon. That's one of the kind of the near-term things. A lot of our things we're looking at, though, are very much are looking a bit further out. So we're kind of helping clients understand what these new technologies will mean for them and setting out roadmaps for them in the next few years. So a lot of the near-term stuff is we're less about the tactical near-term and more about helping them map out the longer-term view of what that means.
Okay, so that's interesting, and probably leads well into the whole the idea of voice, you know, and where does voice fit in with it all? I suppose one of the questions I'd have about the UX team in voice, you know, how is it different from a traditional team that you might have, an interface design team or UX team?
Yeah, so at Alexa, we probably started this process, 5 years ago, and trying to think about how things are different for voice. We did not have a whole bunch of voice UI experts. We didn't, whether they existed or not, we didn't have them in-house. However, what we did have was a bunch of App Store people who had built apps for Kindle, who had built apps for Fire TV, And so we really looked at ways to reskill those. So I actually was in a great CTO luncheon, so nice to meet you guys, that was awesome. And they were talking about the cloud journey and like reskilling your staff for the cloud versus old school infrastructure, and it was very similar for voice UI. So we ended up making a dedicated effort on not just being like, well, you're not an expert in voice, therefore we can't leverage your skills. We looked for artists, creatives, people that could show aptitude, and really developed that skill set. Today they're experts in the field, but they've only been doing it 3 years. And they started not knowing anything about it, right? So I think it's a lot of like finding the people with the right aptitude and right culture and level of creativity, and then really giving them a space to learn and be curious about this. And we're just like, we always say it's day one at Amazon, it's day one at Alexa, because we're just at the beginning. So giving people a chance now, within a few years, they'll be your rock stars. So.
So do you think it's similar to what Jonathan was saying earlier, in that what you're looking for are problem solvers and people who can basically just adapt themselves to solving the problems of working with new technologies and making sure that they work for users?
Yeah, we actually have a principle. We have 14 leadership principles that we model after, and I won't give them to you all, though they're all awesome. Okay, we'll do them all. But I'll tell you about, we have, all of them are important to us, but we actually interview just for these, right? We think functionally, if your resume says it, we'll ask you a couple questions, great, but really, invent and simplify is one of them that we want to know that you can invent. And we're not asking you to invent like the Fire Phone, right? We're asking you, what do you invent on a daily basis? Something as simple as a script that makes you not do something manually anymore. At Amazon, we expect people to invent every single day, even if it's a small, tiny thing or a really big thing. So we're looking for people, problem solvers, but those that can invent, that can innovate on behalf of a customer, think through what a customer wants to do, not just what they're telling us, but what we think they might tell us a year from now, 3 years from now.
So when we start looking at things like future trends, what do you think, and we'll get on to other technologies now, but just stick with the voice. What do you think the future trends of voice are the next 5 years, say?
So some of you were with me this morning. Our future trend at Amazon is really voice everywhere, right? So I anticipate very quickly you'll start to see voice, and we already have a product, someone's here, who has voice like in the car. Not just the way it is today, but in a way that you can speak to the cloud and get access to any information. But voice everywhere, in your kitchen, in the bathroom, in your workplace, being able to schedule a meeting with your voice, being able to navigate conference room scheduling with your voice. I know it sounds miraculous, but who knows, it might happen. But we really see us we're not trying to invent a whole new way of doing things. We're trying to look at what people do every single day and figure out a way to make it easier and voice available. And so there's years and years and years of that kind of work that we have to do.
Okay, maybe I'll turn to Dorothy, because I know you've been working a lot in machine-to-machine product development. And what impact do you think in the future that will have on UX, even in the very near future?
So actually, it all goes hand to hand in voice technology. Everything is connected, and what we're working on is we're enablers. We enable the connection piece. So the basic user experience that people are looking for is that it works and that it's secure. So having a secure connection is a really important part of Internet of Things, of smart homes, smart cities, smart cars. And for industrial Internet of Things, there are so many amazing things that people can do, and some of them are quite boring, really. Like you can connect bins to tell when the bins are full, or you can connect anything. I actually have a list of things here. I brought the list because I knew I wasn't going to remember them. And
I'm already excited by the bins telling you that they can be collected.
Clock-in solutions where they're connected to HR systems, things like that. Wastewater pipes, measuring the quality of our water. There's just so many things that come under the large umbrella of the Internet of Things, and it's a huge stack. From the connection piece, your devices right up to your cloud and your analytics and stuff. So this user experience at every layer, and it's really important that we realize that it's not just about the security, but also what we could get from it. The value in it is the data that you collect and how you manage that data, and user experience and design is really important when it comes to figuring out what to do with that data and how we can innovate using it.
Cool. So, Michael, I might ask you, with all these new technologies, these new ways of interacting, what design tools do you think will come into play?
Yeah, so I guess the design tools, because of the different mediums we have to deal with now, the different interactions we can do, like before was just different device sizes, but now there's all these different interactions we can do. I think we really need to have tools that will let you design in the medium that you're designing for. So I guess too long we've been playing with images of things, whereas we should be actually playing with the real things. So I think the new tools of the future are actually going to let us design in the medium that they're designed for. I think that's the only way forward.
So that you get a real sense of how the user is interacting with and the user themselves, if you're testing it.
Exactly, yeah. You have to see it.
High fidelity experience.
Yeah. I mean, Agile has helped us get through the development cycle so as we can get that experience quicker, but I think we need to pull that back as far as the design tools so as we can see when we're designing it what it's really like.
Okay. And maybe I'll move on to now maybe some of the challenges that we're kind of facing, particularly with all of these new ways of interacting, these new technologies, etc. And maybe I'll ask Noelle. I mean, obviously there's lots of complexities and challenges in designing an AI or a UI or a voice. One of the key challenges I see is, so say if a user has been given a long list of options, when you're dealing with a visual UI, they can scan it, they can pick, whatever. How do you deal with those kind of things? You spoke about multimodal earlier on quite a bit. Is that the solution, or is there something else?
So we have to completely rethink how we're looking at UX when it comes to voice, because there is no screen. When we build, even though we have devices with screens today at Amazon, we don't build for that. So what we do when we go into a room to kind of satisfy this just different way of thinking is that it's a huge challenge because all of us think in screens, whether we like it or not, right? I describe things by going, oh, go here and then go here. With Alexa, it's much more difficult. So we always encourage, the first thing you should do if you're thinking about building a skill is literally go into a room with a big whiteboard or maybe a bunch of cards on a table, and you point to someone and say, you're Alexa and you're the customer, go, right? What are you gonna do? And you document that conversation, and then you have that conversation at least 10 more times with different types of people, with men, with women, with older people, with younger people, to get that huge level of diversity, because it's just different, right? Before we didn't care. Anyone could push the button, right? Anyone could drop down a list and find what they needed. Now I have to figure out not only what they want, but what are they gonna say to represent what they want, which we call intent, which is not the same, and it's extremely difficult to model. And it's a human thing. So I always tell people, I'm like, yep, sorry, you're gonna actually have to communicate in a room, like with your voice, because we're building voice stuff now. So it's much different than what most people, especially UX designers, are familiar with. But that single act, the skills that do that work at the beginning are exponentially more successful than the skills that are just code to deploy to production. Yeah, it doesn't work out. You'll know them when you experience those skills. They are very clearly non-user experience driven.
Maybe on that sort of the machine learning, going back to yourself, Dorothy, how do you think that will influence the way we design?
So there's a lot to gain from the data that we receive. So I suppose that there are, when we have data that we didn't previously have, we can solve problems in different ways, in new ways. We can, innovate. I suppose everybody's heard of how Viagra was discovered by accident through looking at the trends on the data, and it was a side effect that showed up in the trends. You know, there are all sorts of areas like that where, you know, all this data exists. The problems are the same. We just have, we're going to be able to leverage new methods of learning from those.
Okay, and maybe moving on a bit from that and looking at the role of UX and design within organizations. And I'll open this out to anybody who'd like to answer it. And I think it's kind of come up a lot over the day, which is how do you integrate teams, and I mean, there's been diversification within organizations or distributing it around organizations. Who do you think will ultimately end up with ownership of the user experience within organizations? Will it be a design function at all? Will it be a product manager function? Will it be anything else within the organization? Anybody, any thoughts on that?
I think it requires the entire team to be thinking of the customer, you know, the customer, the user, the focus of the business. Obviously, business goals are important, but the development, design, you know, we're working together as a team. It's not just, oh, I'm the designer, I need to do this. It's, you know, how can we leverage everybody's skills in order to make the best possible choices for our customers, and who might end up owning that. I think once we have that thinking at a higher level, as Jonathan was saying earlier, you know, at a strategy level, that's, you know, that's important to try and get that level of thinking at the higher, you know, management level, so that it will trickle down and everybody, you know, is on singing off the same hymn sheet. Everybody is working towards the same goal.
Just to expand on that, I think like any good design, it's at its best when it gets out of the way. So I think as designers, if we're going into organizations, helping them to set up capabilities and helping our clients to bring design into their organization, I think, you know, if we're successful when we can take a step back and we can say, yes, that's, you know, that's, and if there's no clear owner, even better again. Mm-hmm. I think if it's something that kind of pervades the whole culture, and it's something that's kind of deeply embedded into a culture, and it's not really clear where design sits or where the role of creative problem solving sits, that's a good place to be, I think.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the whole idea of the UX maturity model, you know, and if you become an organization, it's throughout the entire structure of the company.
The arts and crafts, as Donald was saying earlier. Yeah. Colouring in.
He's fine.
I'll go. So I just wanted to say that we were not perfect in the placement or creation of our UX team. It was not even really a priority. We were very focused on the product and getting it to our customers as quickly as possible. But it was never too late. So I just want to iterate that, like, no matter how advanced or mature your organization is, like, it's never too late to figure out where UX fits in. I do agree that pervasiveness would be ideal, but in our organization, like, we literally, someone had to go, okay, so who's designing this? And have someone take ownership of that and really become a priority conversation in our organization and in our company. And again, we're a bunch of companies at Amazon, right? So retail's got that down. They do that all the time. But Alexa, we were an infant. We were a brand new startup, if you will. And so we really had to take a step back about a year into our massive growth and go, all right, we need to do a better job at this. And our customers were great about telling us that we needed to do a better job. But it was never too late. We ended up hiring a new director who didn't exist when we created the company. So we now have an entire team of engineers dedicated to that. And it's super important to us. But just wanted to say it's never too late to do that. But it's ridiculously important, at least to the work that we're doing.
And generally, anybody can answer this as well. Although I do think it kind of ties in very much with the whole strategy side of things, and understanding business is the next stage for UXers. But what do you think the role of big data is in terms of how people are designing, how it fits in with the organization? Maybe I'll point that at Jonathan.
Shit, why did I get that question? Well, I mean, I think that there's like this kind of always this battle between, you know, quantitative data and qualitative data when people are building products, and I think it always really depends on what you're actually trying to solve, what you're actually trying to build, and whether you want to actually go, if you're looking at something like big data, you also need people to analyze it and understand it and be able to take that and then kind of, you know, translate it into product terms or into user problems and all this sort of stuff. So I don't know, I think that there was this thought that, you know, big data was going to be able to answer all these really big, important design questions, but when I'm in these, you know, larger organizations, or these large kind of famous tech companies that are always talking about big data, when you actually look at what products are getting out there and being successful, it's often based on a hunch. Often based on a hunch combined with what actually happens on the market and then iteration. So I think that maybe once companies start getting much, much better at not just collecting data, putting it into buckets, and it just like kind of having it there, but once they kind of can maybe analyze it and find trends and kind of be able to say, okay, we need these like 4 products, we're missing these 4 products over here. Maybe then it's going to change, but I think right now, today, it's still very kind of messy, almost in a nice way. Like it's still very human, these decisions that are being made.
So do you think that data at the moment is just something in order to assess design decisions that you've made and provide metrics and those beloved statistics that management teams love, you know, in order to justify stuff?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe you can answer that, but for us, I know that data is also, I mean, like it's often used as some sort of a metric to calm down the stakeholders so that they don't feel like it's such a hunch and that we're not going to market spending like 7 million on this thing that might not actually work out. And it's also a way to kind of get rid of the responsibility of the product teams sometimes, because they can say, well, the data actually told us that we should launch this thing that now lost like $3 billion, so let's just blame it on that. And for me, I just think that it should be used as like, you know, it's kind of it's something that helps you, but it shouldn't right now, while we're still kind of struggling to understand what users really want, and we still don't have a good way of predicting whether something's going to be successful or not. I think it should just be, considered what it is, which is some sort of like it's a help. It's not the thing that's making the decisions.
So potentially, if it is interpreted correctly, it could actually influence a design.
I mean, maybe there's going to be like, you know, 5 years from now, everyone will be out of the job on every product level, because there'll just be the data, and there'll be an AI that's just like, we need to make an app that's like Tinder, but when you swipe to the right, I don't know, a poo emoji comes up, and that's going to make us like 3 billion. And then we just kind of sit down watching these products coming out and using them. I think that's going to happen. I think you're going to say the same thing, right?
Yeah, I concur. So from a kind of a different perspective, at Amazon, if you look at our homepage, which you probably don't go too often, but if you went to Amazon.com's homepage, it's made up of about 200 services. And each service is developed by a pizza team of about 8 or 9 engineers. But it's completely driven by data. So for example, many of you probably have heard about the recommendations engine, right? Where you go in and it's like, oh, look, your friends bought this, right? That's all data that we are mining and tuning algorithms for every single day, right? So that, it's a very specific thing. So anyone who's like in product, who has product websites, like that's instantly, you can use your data to determine what your customers might want. And we are very clear about, at Amazon, we love your data, we love your shopping experience, because we use that to make a better experience for you. And actually, our customers are now asking us to do that. But it is a huge part of what makes that retail site work. So I think that there's many different, like there's a lot of strategic discussions I'm in that mirrors exactly what you said. And then there's like the meat of retail organizations, which are using data every day to train AI models to build functionality that's readily available for customers. So it's AI and machine learning and big data are such big swathy words. It's useful to kind of dive deeper into that and find out a niche and kind of focus on how that's used in a niche, because it's hard at the industry level to talk about it. Like, you did a great job, because poo is a good reference. Poo emoji.
I think it's interesting, because as designers, as an industry, we've been telling all our clients for the last few years, hey, you got to like data, collect everything, you know, like you've got to gather data. And now they're all coming to us, and we're finding this a lot, that like, okay, so yeah, we've got like this enormous bucket of data. What do we do now? And people are like, we have all the stuff, we've been collecting all these things, but it's not really telling us much. So, you know, we find that a lot of what we're doing in Fjord and the doc is working with clients and working with companies to help them understand what to do with these big, massive troves of data.
Yeah.
And one of the there's a few things that we've found like that are kind of maybe worth being aware of for designers. On kind of data-led design projects, we often spend maybe up to 80% of our time just wrangling that data into shape and just kind of getting that into a kind of a usable format that you can start to extract insights from. So it never arrives to us in this, you know, the data is often used as this thing, just this magic tap that you just turn on and then all these insights will flow out. It's not the case, you know, so I think it's a misconception maybe sometimes, and it's oversimplified the amount of work that goes into just getting this big messy tangle into some sort of shape that you can start to have a conversation about it.
Is the question really, are we collecting the right data at the outset?
Yeah, and what questions are we asking?
Just on that point, it's, you know, we tend to think of, oh, the data is going to be so exciting, we're going to learn so much from it, but we can do it to support really boring things as well. Like we use it to suggest, we use machine learning to suggest what kind of, you know, number of IP addresses or an IP address range that we can give to our customers when they're setting up their Internet of Things, you know, projects and connectivity. And, you know, it may seem like a small, insignificant thing, but it just means that they can do something that's normally really, really, really hard, and at the click of a button, they can actually set something up that's workable for them.
Sorry, I'll just jump in as well. I know you want to move on to the next question. But I actually think some of the times we're thinking about the data and from our customer experience and how we can enhance the customer experience with the data. But there's also the designer experience. And I think we can actually use data a lot from basically our previous user tests and our previous basically the products being released. We can actually learn from that, and we can eventually use machine learning and AI to be able to predict how a user test is going to work on our designs before we user test them. So the minute you finish a design, you can actually click submit, and you can get some kind of indications of how will it perform before you do the real user test. So that'll help us a lot in design.
Is there even a case where, rather than using data to influence the design, that the design should be to collect data and basically create more value within a product?
Well, yeah, a bit of both, but it's actually that AI and the machine learning is just a tool, and it's an extra asset for us. It's not something to threaten that's going to take away our job. It's actually something that's going to help us do a better job.
Yeah. Okay, just the last thing that I was going to talk about was, and for the future of UX, is the methodologies that we're using. I mean, we hear there's new processes, there's lean, agile, and I know I actually really want to get John into this because he knows quite a bit about different development processes. So what methodologies do you think are surfacing that will further enhance the role of UX?
So I suppose, like, there's a number of different buckets there, but just to look at maybe artificial intelligence and machine learning, that's something we've been kind of thinking a bit about. And as a way that's directly influencing how our UX process at the moment is that we found it really useful to kind of to think about the machine, as in the AI, whatever's behind a product or service you're developing, as a user itself, as a teammate. So it's a really good analogy to kind of think about how this kind of function and capability will fit into whatever it is you're building. So when you think about it as a teammate, like, what kind of qualities do you want in that teammate, and what qualities do you want that to bring? So kind of humanizing it in that kind of context helps you kind of understand what role it might play, what role it might have, and that even extends then to things like we're giving the AI user stories. So, you know, as part of our roadmap and as part of our planning process, we're saying, okay, as an AI, I want to do X so I can achieve Y. So kind of slotting it into existing processes we found to be a really useful way to make that kind of work and make that fit in a context that makes sense.
Okay, Michael, you might want to add?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a new term, I guess, coming out, I guess, in the last couple of years, basically design ops. And I think design ops, basically, it can really help. DevOps has helped streamline the process of development, so basically from code directly to the user as quickly as possible. But I think it's really going a step further back. For some reason in DevOps, there's actually no design step, which I think is pretty ridiculous. But I think the new tools coming out will actually help the designer actually release code directly to production. So basically it's not just a developer going straight through continuous integration, but actually designers going straight to production. Similar to Salesforce are using tokens to allow designers to change little style changes, but I think we can enhance that and allow the designers to do more stuff quicker so they don't have a bottleneck of a developer in the way.
Okay, and Jonathan, I know you've worked a lot or I've heard, I don't know, with Jake Knapp from Google Ventures on the design sprints, as he sprints to the microphone. Do you think that these processes will influence design processes and development processes?
I think that something like the design sprint, for anyone who doesn't know, it's just like a 5-day process that Google Ventures put together for quickly validating products. I think that was, or what's really interesting about it is that it's almost like a cold, logical approach to design that, you know, at first feels super weird, feels like very anti-design, but I think building in these almost logical cold systems around something that's extremely creative is a really great way to be able to be, let's say, to increase the productivity of design. Because I think that one problem that I see, and I know this is like kind of going slightly off topic, but in terms of methodologies, one problem I see is that companies try to integrate extremely difficult things like design thinking into their like, it's like, we're a giant old company with like 30 billion revenue and we're in the whatever, and we now want to like get really good at design, and they call in a company, they try to integrate design thinking like as an overarching, like we're going to be more creative, we're going to give everyone design thinking workshops, and then everyone's going to be more creative. But as soon as that's done, people don't really know where to start then, and it's like this. There's almost like they have all of these individual tools. They have the general theories. Okay, we got to be creative. We got to make prototypes. We got to, you know, mix our ideas and do backflips. But I think that then these companies are like, okay, but how do we actually design stuff? And then they end up having to call agencies in again. And I think that the things like the design sprint are like a simple enough step-by-step recipe that I think that companies could figure out, like product teams would be able to figure out how to integrate something like that much, much quicker and much, much more successfully than these broad theory heavy things like design thinking. So I think over the next few years, and I'm already seeing this in Silicon Valley as well, companies that were very heavily, you know, relying on very creative people and like spending a lot of time trying to hire creative people and like trying to poach creative leads from company to company, now they're becoming a little bit more self-sufficient by teaching simpler, more simple, more logical, more cold design methods that are almost like producing creativity and producing products. So I mean, I'm a big believer in the design sprint just from a cold, logical point of view. I also like design thinking, but it's not like, I just really don't like when companies are like, yeah, we just did our design thinking workshop, so now we're going to be able to make like really good products, and I'm just like, oh, better watch out, guys.
Yeah. Do you think that things like design sprints and agile and stuff, and where they're very lean and they're focused, but do you think that there is any danger that the overarching, whether it be a design construct or like something that's actually holding all of these little components in place, is somehow forgotten, you know, and people start focusing on the individual components as opposed to...
You mean like one big design philosophy or something like that? Or?
Well, it's more, I was thinking more like a patchwork quilt, you know, where you sort of have a lot of individual, you know, innovations and focuses, and that would not only be on the design, but it could be on research, it could be on development, and then all of a sudden you're left with something that doesn't hang together very seamlessly.
I totally understand what you mean, but I think that if there's almost no company that I know that even does design in a consistent way in the first place. So even just getting them to do one thing right would already be a big win for like 90% of these larger corporations. So for me, I'm less worried about having a consistent user experience and design, like bigger picture thing with the, you know, writing the values and the toilet door and stuff like this. I'm more concerned about, let's prove that this one team can release a product faster than this team, and let's see if that starts spreading throughout the company. So I'm sort of just resigned to the fact that having a consistent design system throughout an entire company is kind of impossible, and almost every team at every one of these large corporations, or even successful Silicon Valley style companies, you talk to every single team, they have their own way of doing things, and I think it's just, you have to try to get your small wins. I used to really try to be like, we're going to change everything, we're going to get everyone on board, and we're all going to be doing this stuff, and I'm like, no, not a chance. It's a bit of a negative answer, but the truth.
Great. Well, I think we've actually gone way over time for the day, and I think we'd probably finish up there. So I'd like to thank Jonathan, Noelle, John, Dorothy, and Michael. I'm terrible at names.
Thank you.